Sarasota County Bar Association is proud to continue its partnership with the Education Channel of Sarasota County to bring you the law in Sarasota.
Welcome to Law in Sarasota. This program is supported by grants from the Sarasota County Bar Association and the Community Foundation of Sarasota. And we would not be here today without the expertise of the professionals behind the camera at the studios of the Educational Channel of the Sarasota County School Board. Law in Sarasota has as its goal bringing information about the profession and the judiciary to the public, and to showcase the many positive contributions judges and lawyers make to our local community. There's big changes underway in the judiciary of the 12th Circuit. We have 3 counties in our circuit: Sarasota, Manatee, and DeSoto. We have 31 judges, 21 circuit and 10 county. Last year, 3 of our most experienced circuit judges retired. They were replaced by 3 local attorneys, none of whom have been judges before. And they moved from private practice to the bench on a fairly fast track, as we'll see. Because they're appointed by the governor, their backgrounds, experience, and reputations are not known well by the public at large. So one day they're advocating for clients and against opposing attorneys in court. The next day they're called upon to be neutral and impartial magistrates. We will explore what that means as an experience to these rookie judges. And in separate programs, we will introduce you to the other judges. But today we have with us Hunter Carroll, an experienced civil trial attorney, now Judge Carroll, to discuss his transition from the bar to the bench. Hunter, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Judge Haworth.
Glad you could take time off for this. We know you're busy. So what we're going to do today is to present the Hunter Carroll that no one really knows out in the public and tell them things about your background. And I have to tell you, looking at your resume, it's pretty darn impressive. We're going to start pretty much at the beginning. I want you to tell us where you were raised, where you went to school, and then we'll get into some other matters. So tell me, where were you raised?
Actually, I was born and raised here in Sarasota, born at Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and raised here in Sarasota. Went to public schools throughout my entire prior time being here.
What elementary school did you go to?
I started out at Wilkinson, and then in 4th grade, at that time Pineview started at 4th, so at 4th grade I moved over to Pineview, and so I was at Pineview, and then my mom taught at Sarasota High, so when I became a 9th grader, I moved over to Sarasota High and did my high school at Sarasota High, where actually you went, Judge.
That's right. Anchors away. The other thing about that, were you at the old Pineview?
I was. The portable campus with no cafeteria. It was great. I loved it, actually.
So tell me about high school. What did you do at high school?
Well, certainly the academic portion of it. I was involved in several clubs. I was in Key Club, speech and debate, did a lot of speech and debate type tournaments. And my older brother he played football. My younger brother played football, but I just decided not to play football.
Well, tell me about your experience with teen court, because a lot of folks know about teen court, but they don't know about your participation in that.
Well, back in the fall of 1989, I was a freshman in high school, and there was some little newsletter that went around Sarasota High talking about this new program called Teen Court, where teenagers who have actually been arrested for a crime would actually have lawyers that are teenagers that are in school with them. The jurors would be teenagers. Every position in the courtroom would be a teenager, so that a person could truly have a sentencing hearing by a jury of his or her own peers. And I just love the concept. So in 9th grade, I started volunteering, and I volunteered all the way through high school here at the Sarasota program. And then when I went off to college, I did a little bit up in Gainesville, and then throughout the other parts of the state when I was outside of Sarasota and Manatee. And then when I came back, I've continued to volunteer.
So you must have been one of the first kids to go through teen court or to work with it, right?
All right, we were actually the second class, if you will, of Sarasota Teen Court, and it's thriving and kicking today.
All right, let's talk about your college career. You went to the University of Florida, and let's talk about your undergraduate degree. What was that in?
Well, I started off as a political science major, and because I had several AP classes in high school and dual enrollment, I was going to be able to graduate really quickly, and decided I wasn't quite ready to graduate. So I kind of suspended my political science degree, and then I started over in the business school and got a finance degree. So I actually graduated with 2 degrees, one in finance and one in political science, but I did do it in 4 years.
Well, I know you're a modest person, but I got to have some comment here about the different academic awards and honors that you received. So let's talk about your undergraduate. You participated in a number of clubs that are distinctive. Tell me some of the things that you received as part of your undergraduate career that were distinctive.
Well, I was involved in student government, which at the time had about a $7 million budget, and it organized a lot of the activities on campus. And out of that, I also worked in the Florida Blue Key, the Gator Growl type of homecoming performances. And that gave me an opportunity to really do a lot of leadership. And ultimately, I was selected as the outstanding male leader in the the spring of 1997 when I graduated. I actually followed Danny Werfel, who was the outstanding male leader the year before me. So okay. I thought that was kind of interesting. And
so you were the outstanding male graduate, basically, for that.
Yeah, and I was able to keep my grades up pretty well, and I actually graduated with honors in both of my degrees.
Oh, that's impressive. You know, I went to the University of Tennessee, and I graduated cum laude, get out of here. So when I see anybody with these credentials, I'm very impressed. And then you went on to law school, and what did you study mostly there that you liked?
Florida constitutional law. That was my favorite class. We were actually fortunate to have who was then an interim dean, but John Mills, he had been the Speaker of the House. And so not only did we get the book work and the academic side, but he would talk to us about how Tallahassee actually worked. And so there was a practical component to it, and I just absolutely loved that class, and then followed it up with local and government law.
So Tallahassee actually does work?
Well, it works. It just has its own set of rules, I guess.
That's encouraging. But in any event, you took a variety of honors there. You left out. You graduated the University of Florida with honors in finance, with honors in political science, and then you go to law school. You graduate with honors from there.
I did, yes.
So that's pretty impressive. And you also got a pretty interesting job at that time. Who'd you go to work for?
Well, I was very fortunate. I ended up working for who was then the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, Justice Charles T. Wells. And for the 2 years that he was the chief, I was there and was one of his staff attorneys.
What a great experience. I mean, I can't imagine a better background for becoming a judge than working with a Supreme Court justice like Justice Wells.
It was fantastic. It gave me an opportunity to see how judges should operate, how they should be as far as their temperament. Also, I learned a lot about a different number of fields, including the death penalty law, because the Florida Supreme Court handles all appeals and death penalty cases, which is something that as a circuit judge now I might have to be called upon to preside over. And of course, during the time I was there, it was the election between George Bush and Al Gore, so it was the most interesting time, I think, to be there.
And Justice Wells, after he retired, gave some fairly interesting insights into that particular lawsuit. He's spoken publicly about it. All right, so you get out of law school, then what do you do?
Well, I spent the first two and a half years clerking at the Florida Supreme Court with Justice Wells, and then I actually asked my granddad, who actually was a long-term lawyer here in Sarasota, what should I do? Who should I go learn from? And he had a friend of his at Carlton Fields by the lady by the name of Sylvia Walbolt, who is one of the most intelligent lawyers I have ever met. And so I got an opportunity to go work at Carlton Fields and learn under Sylvia, and just learned what it meant to be a lawyer, a professional lawyer, And so that's what I did for the next 3 years after my time up in Tallahassee.
Well, we have to say that that pedigree is impressive because your grandfather, Hunter Gibbons, was a founding member of the Dickinson Gibbons law firm, which is one of the prominent law firms in Sarasota. And I remember speaking to him. He was a World War II vet, flew B-17s, I believe.
B-25s.
B-25s, and I know
70 combat missions.
And he had a model in his office, and he was really one of the great generation folks. So in any event, I'm sure he was an inspiration too for you.
Very much so. And there are pictures of me as a young child. I would actually go with my granddad to hearings when I was 6 or 7 years old. So there's not many 6 or 7-year-olds that dress up in a business suit and want to go watch their granddad argue a case. But that's part of what I did growing up.
Well, he was one of our preeminent trial lawyers, I know, because I used to try cases against him and not always successful. In any event, let's talk about what happened when you started practice. Tell us where you went first after the law clerk job at the Supreme Court.
Well, I did the next 3 years at Carlton Fields. They had an office then in St. Petersburg, so I lived up there, and then actually lived in Manatee and commuted up to St. Petersburg. And then I got a call kind of out of the blue. I actually got 2 calls. One, I had an opportunity to go work as Assistant General Counsel for Governor Bush, or I could go to Arcadia and work at a little law firm out there. And I'd always wanted to be here in Sarasota, so I decided to actually go to the law firm in Arcadia and work there for a couple of years and learn more of the business side of how to run a law firm as well. And that's with a gentleman by the name of David Carlton. And then I had a case against Lamar Matthews and the Matthews Eastmore firm while I was with David Carlton. And when that case resolved, there was an opportunity to move over to Matthews Eastmore in downtown Sarasota. And so I came on over.
Well, you know, what's interesting too is that we've told the audience that there's 3 judges that have been selected and starting out new, and Judge Iden was a prosecutor. Judge Dees, later part of her career, focused on family law, and here you are as a civil litigator coming in as a judge, and that's a wonderful thing for balance on our bench. What sort of cases did you handle in civil litigation?
Well, primarily I did what's called business litigation, commercial disputes, which was either business versus a business or a customer versus a business. It involved a lot of items where there was complaints that either someone was doing something fraudulently or was trying to rip somebody off, and would try to right those wrongs or defend the company depending on which side in that particular case I was in. And what was interesting being in a commercial litigator is you're not always on the plaintiff side and you're not always on the defense side, so you actually have to learn, if you will, both sides, because one day you might be advocating for something where the next day in another client, that's not the position you need to take. So it was actually a really good ability to learn both viewpoints, if you will.
You know, I hear that from defense attorneys too and prosecutors, that it's a good experience for them legally to have done defense work and prosecutorial work, because it gives you perspective from both sides and makes you a better advocate when you can see the strong points and weak points from that different perspective. So during the time that you were at the Matthews Eastmore firm, you also had an opportunity to assist the local bar. Let's review the things you've done for the local bar association. And one of them, you just lost a position with them, right?
When I was appointed, I actually was the president of the Sarasota Bar Association, and actually one of the sponsors of this television
program.
show.
Right.
And so I had to resign that, but my law partner, Keith DeBose, was actually the president-elect, and so we had talked about it, and he was very kind enough to continue on with some of the things that I had started when I was president.
Well, tell us about your work with the Young Lawyers Division and the Florida Bar, the Board of Governors.
Okay, well, the Florida Bar is an organization of about 100,000 lawyers, and it's governed by a group called the Board of Governors. And then young lawyers, those that are generally speaking 5 years of practice or less, or mid-30s or younger, get together and they have their own governing body. And I was fortunate enough to be elected to the statewide Young Lawyers Board several years ago, and we helped shape policies and help create a lot of the continuing legal education programs that the Florida Supreme Court requires all new or young lawyers to engage in. And so I'd go around the state trying to help set those programs up. I call Judge Williams a couple times, Judge Quartermain, to come and speak to young lawyers, present different types of, this is what it means to be a professional, and really try to work on ethics and professionalism and civility and promote those goals.
Let me ask you about your current position. Now, you were a civil trial lawyer, and you get appointed judge when?
I think it was October 30th was the day I got the call from the governor.
Halloween.
Yes.
And then when did you actually go on the bench and start working as a judge?
Well, that day was November 23rd. I was appointed to a position that actually there was a vacancy already, and so the longer it took me to get on the bench, the longer either cases would have to be covered by other judges or just not gotten to, and so I felt very strongly that I needed to move as quickly as I can. So I basically had 3 weeks to shut down that portion of the law practice that I was doing with, and certainly I had a lot of partners at Matthews Eastmore who were very accommodating and helpful in that regard. And I started talking to other members of the court, and they loaded me up with books and these big binders because I was moving into the criminal bench, which is not something that I had really done much with since my time at the Florida Supreme Court back in 2000 to 2002. So that was a good 15 years ago. And so I started just reading every night, working until 2 or 3 in the morning, just closing out the practice and then also trying to study what I would need to learn and know to take this criminal bench.
So did you get assistance from other judges? How did that work?
Sure. I went into other judges' office, and frankly, to this day, I still continue to go in and just sit down and talk about, how things are. Like I said, they gave me some books to read and some binders, and I would go through them and I would just study them. I'd go read cases, and just they helped pointed me in the right direction, gave me good insight, helped give me a lot of confidence. So when I actually started on the bench, I had actually been sitting in with other judges, and so it was more comfortable than I would have originally thought.
What's your impression of the criminal bench now that you've been on it for a couple of months?
I'm enjoying it very well, and what's really interesting about the criminal bench, which is different than what I was used to as a civil practitioner, is you generally have the same lawyers in front of you every day. And so there's a lot more familiarity that you get rather quickly with the state attorneys and the public defenders and Office of Regional Counsel, plus the private bar. And so it's actually kind of more of like a family environment where in my role, I'm supposed to just listen to all the arguments and call the balls and the strikes as best as I can and as fairly as I can. And I've really enjoyed that.
Did you find the case management part of this a little interesting and challenging?
I think that's the biggest understatement I've heard. The number one item that as a judge in the criminal bench that you have to always work on is what we call case management, which is ensuring that the huge volume of cases that are there continue to move through the system, but doing it in such a way that every single defendant is ensured that he has or she has a competent lawyer that is doing a good job to represent that person. And so while the system needs cases to move, you also have to ensure that they have enough time to work on it. And so that case management piece of how do you get people to continue to do all the things they need to do to ensure that you get to that trial in 2 months or 3 months or whenever the trial is set. And so that person who's the defendant gets a fair trial. That's the most interesting, challenging, and fun aspect of the job.
Case management is not taught in law school for judges.
No.
You learn it on the job. There's just no other way to do it. So it is a challenge. But I want to ask some questions a little bit more personal, biographical. Are you married?
I'm married. I've been married for 8 years now. And
Kids?
A little boy who's a very big toddler. He's 3 years old and loves to tell us how independent he is.
So tell us how you met your wife. It's kind of interesting. She's a lawyer also.
I actually met her at a Sarasota County Bar holiday party a little more than 10 years ago. I was supposed to be in a deposition in New York City, and I got a call the night before saying, well, it's snowing up there and the airports were going to be behind, and so we postponed those depositions. And a friend of mine who's another lawyer in Sarasota by the name of Doug Cherry, he called up and said, hey, let's go to the holiday party. So it just kind of was on the spur of the moment. And then when I was at the holiday party, I met my wife Jessica, and we started chatting there and just kept chatting and closed down the facility, and the rest, as we say, is history.
So you're spending a lot of time with your son, I imagine.
Trying to. He's a lovely boy.
How do you like to spend your spare time?
Well, I spend most of it with Jessica and Austin. Austin's my son. And we try to do things with him, especially on the weekends, because my wife works as well. So we try to spend as much time as we can on the weekends. I also, when I have some free time, I enjoy going skeet shooting. And I used to play golf, but that takes so much time now that it's...
Let me tell you, you can either be a judge or you can be a golfer. You can't do both, I can tell you that. Well, let me just wind this up and ask you, when a lawyer or a litigant comes into your court, what do you think they should expect from you? What are you going to give them?
Well, the first thing I would hope is I would get information ahead of time, because I'll always read it and be prepared. And I think a person who is appearing before me should expect that I'm going to be prepared and that I'm going to listen to all the sides, and then I'm going to try to rule as promptly and as fairly as I can. And I'm going to give everybody a fair hearing, no matter who that person is.
Well, you're legendary for thoroughness, and I know that the bar and the people that appear in front of you will appreciate that, because it does make for a great judge. And I want to thank you for taking time from your busy calendar, coming in and doing this. And I'd like to thank the folks at the education channel here for giving us this opportunity. We are very fortunate to have this facility here. It's high tech, and if you could see where we are, you'd be very impressed. In any event, until next time, this is Lee Haworth signing off for Law and Sarasota. Thank you.
For more than 36 years, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County has worked one-on-one with estate planning attorneys and their client to make a lasting impact through philanthropy. The Community Foundations safeguard the charitable legacies of donors to ensure that they continue for years to come. Visit www.cfsarasota.org for more information.
As a voluntary organization of over 900 lawyers and judges, and a leader of the local legal community, the Sarasota County Bar Association advances professionalism, promotes practice development, encourages public service, fosters fellowship, and supports access to legal services for all. Visit www.sarasotabar.com for more information, or call 941-861-8180.